Hi, I'm Jennie with Infinity Real Estate, and today what I would like to do is answer some of the most common questions I get from people as they are considering a move to Washington and the Gig Harbor area. Specifically today, I would like to talk about the overall cost of living in Washington and in Gig Harbor as it pertains to other areas of the country. Many of my clients who are considering a move here are factoring cost of living into their retirement plans, but this applies to anyone who is considering a move to this area. Okay, so where does Washington State and specifically Gig Harbor factor into the continuum of affordability? Well, spoiler alert, straight from the top, we are not the least expensive place in the country. You can look at any given statistic and it's going to tell you that Washington State ranks either as high as the third most expensive state in the country up to about number 13. So we're just not the least expensive. But then again, fabulous, incredible places like we have usually are not going to be the cheapest. On a positive note, however, Washington has no state income tax and, as we're going to discuss later in the video, some of the cheapest utilities in the country. So there are plenty of positives. Let's dive first and foremost into housing, which is the primary driver of Washington being on the more expensive side of states to live in the country. So far in 2024, the median housing price in Gig Harbor is about $840,000. That compares in Washington State to an overall average median price of about $650,000. As far as the country is concerned, the overall median price is more like $440,000. So you can see Gig Harbor is on the high side of the affordability range for housing. If we want to get into waterfront and water view properties, which is what Gig Harbor is known for, I looked at average prices as opposed to median because we just don't have a large enough sample. But average, what you can expect for a water view property is about 1.2 million and above. And for a waterfront property of all types, the average price is about 1.75 million in 2024. Gig Harbor is a very desirable community. If you want to learn more, check out some of my other videos. I have lots of information to tell you all about it. But that's partly why our home prices are very high. We have limited inventory and we also have a limited amount of geographic space. And so therefore, in addition to all the people wanting to live here, we do have higher than average median home prices. But I do want to remind you, $840,000 is the median. That means that half of the sales in 2024 were lower than $840,000. So just reminding you that we do have a wide range and we have something for everyone. Okay, so home prices are not cheap here, but what about property taxes? Definitely, I get lots of questions about property taxes. Here's somewhat of a bright spot. Overall, average property taxes in Washington are substantially lower than other parts of the country. As a percentage of the assessed value of the property, Washington property taxes are quite a bit lower than most other places in the country. We can expect on average about 0.92% of assessed value to be paid annually in property taxes. This compares to a national average of about 1.1%, and on the high end, New Jersey is over 2% of assessed value per year. Okay, fine. So you say your assessed values and your median sale prices are so much higher, so of course you have high property taxes. Sure, that is true, but I'm always astonished when I hear what other people around the country are paying in property tax for homes that are significantly less than ours. So I'm going to put property taxes in the plus column for affordability for Washington. I don't want to go into too much detail in this video. Perhaps I'll do another whole video about this, but a question I get all the time is, how are our assessed values determined? And it's a really great question because in many other parts of the country, a tax assessed value is directly correlated with a sale price. California is a great example. As soon as a property sells in the state of California, the tax assessed value resets to the sale price. So many people assume that that's what happens here in Washington. It's very, very different. In Washington, assessed values are determined on what's called a mass appraisal basis. So each county has assessors and they look at overall market trends, and then they look at statistical models of features and locations and prices, and they lump it all together and they come up with annual property assessments for everyone. Is it 100% fair? Maybe not necessarily, and yes, there is a way to contest your tax assessed value if you don't agree. But tax assessed values are assessed each year based on these factors. We have been in a market of 14 years of constant appreciation. So yes, we have seen property tax increases, just have most people around the country. So that being said, if our market conditions change, believe it or not, our assessed values can go down. I know it's hard to believe, but it could happen. So what about average rates for homeowner insurance on an annual basis? Here is a place where Washington shines. There are only 2 states in the country that currently have lower annual rates for homeowners insurance, and that's Utah and Oregon. On average, our rate is about 1% per $1,000 of assessed value. If you compare that to a state like Florida right now, their average rate is about 2.3% per $1,000 of assessed value. Why is that? Well, in reality, annual insurance prices are going up just about everywhere in the country. That's because other areas are experiencing major natural disasters, as we all know. And even though we don't have them to the same degree, especially in our area of Washington, we still have to pay for everybody else around the country. So we are no exception. Our premiums are going up as well. One consideration we do have in Washington is earthquakes, and therefore earthquake insurance. Earthquake coverage is not going to be standard in a regular homeowner's policy, but it can be purchased separately. I will tell you that most people opt not to purchase earthquake insurance because it has huge deductibles, as much as 10 and 20%, and there are coverage limitations. But just to give you an example, if you have a home valued right about $1 million, you probably can get an earthquake insurance policy if you so choose for between $3,000 and $5,000 per year. Another consideration is flood insurance. And you might think because we have water everywhere that everybody has to have flood insurance. Well, that's actually not the case at all. There are very few places in the Gig Harbor area that require flood insurance in order for a home to be financed. There are certain low and no bank waterfront properties, specifically if they are in the area where it is more prone to the prevailing storms and the winds. Those properties are going to require flood insurance in order to seek financing, but the overall majority of our properties do not. So certainly, to summarize the affordability or not of Washington's housing situation, yes, we have higher costs in some areas, we have lower costs in others. Again, you take into account the fabulous lifestyle that we have here, and I think it's an overall plus. What about transportation? If you read about costs in Washington, you'll often hear that transportation costs are high, and that's one of the reasons Washington isn't the cheapest place to live. What I would say is we've got some good news and some bad news on that front. Let's talk about the good news first. You might be surprised to hear this, that auto insurance costs in Washington are almost 20% lower than the rest of the country on average. Sound a little strange? Well, it kind of does to me too, except for the fact that whether you like this or not, Washington drivers are known to be awfully slow. So when you have slow drivers, you have fewer accidents and therefore lower auto insurance rates. What about the not so good news? That would be our gas tax. Washington has some of the highest gas tax in the country. Currently, it's almost 50 cents per gallon. Since Washington does not have state income tax, they do have to fill their coffers other ways, and the gas tax is a big one. So if you're looking for the cheapest gas around, it's not going to be here in Washington. However, I'm going to get to this in a moment, but I mentioned earlier we have inexpensive utility costs. With electricity being inexpensive, we're seeing more and more electric vehicles on the road, and so if you're looking to decrease costs, an electric vehicle is a great option. Specifically, if you live in the Gig Harbor area or you travel to the Gig Harbor area, we are affected by tolls going over the Tacoma Narrows Bridge to Tacoma. So if you are on the peninsula and you're heading back east over the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, there is a toll. If you have a good to go pass, which most of us do, it's $5 each time you cross the toll bridge. But there is no toll on the way back. Now that might seem like an awful lot, but one of the great things about Gig Harbor is it's fully self-contained. So unless you work or attend school on the other side of the bridge, if you're just looking for your daily goods and services and living, everything you need is right here in Gig Harbor and on the peninsula. Lastly, I'll touch a little bit on annual vehicle tabs. I am not an expert in this area, but I can tell you that in my opinion, the vehicle tab fee in Washington is very fair and reasonable. When I lived in Georgia, I was paying almost $500 a year to register my car. Here, the base rate is about $45, and there are some factors that increase it, but you shouldn't be paying more than $100 or $120 per year as a max. Okay, let's talk about utilities. This is actually a favorite subject of mine because I can deliver some good news. Our utility rates in Washington and specifically in Gig Harbor are some of the lowest in the country. First, we have to talk about the fact that our temperature extremes are not very much. We have very mild temperatures that range on average in the winter at 35, and in the summer, the highs are about 85. So if you consider other places in the country where they have dramatic lows and dramatic highs, we're just not paying for energy to do all of that heating and cooling. So step above. In addition to that, Washington is known to have some of the lowest electricity rates in the country. And in Gig Harbor, we have a fantastic local co-op that is not only an extremely well-run company, but we have the lowest rates in Washington State right here in Gig Harbor. As far as natural gas, I would say that our rates are very average, not expensive. If you have a home to heat with natural gas in the winter, you're probably spending around $100. If you have a less efficient furnace, maybe up to $200, but that's probably about it on a monthly basis. And then we get to water. I hear crazy stories from people, especially from California, about how much their water bills are. It's not uncommon that I hear $1,000 or more a month. People are shocked when I tell them that my base water bill on a monthly basis, $35 a month. I kid you not, $35. If you live in the city of Gig Harbor, where you have both city water and sewer, you can anticipate an average of $100 per month. But that's still incredibly reasonable compared to other parts of the country. At this point, we consider internet a utility, so I'll just let you know that high-speed internet is available just about everywhere within the Gig Harbor area, and the rates are going to be standard for what you're going to pay most other places in the country. I do want to say that currently, as of the end of 2024, high-speed fiber optic is not available in most places in Gig Harbor. It is over in Seattle and in Tacoma. We don't yet have it here, but the rumor is it's coming. What about daily goods and services? Groceries, clothing, going out to restaurants. How does that compare? Well, what I believe is we are very much on par in terms of our prices with other areas of the country. But you have to factor in that we've got the full range. We've got high-end stores right here in Gig Harbor, groceries, boutiques, all the way down to more on the affordable side, like Target and Costco and Home Depot. So with that being the case, I think you can find anything you want in Gig Harbor at any end of the price spectrum, and you're gonna find it on par with other places. Lastly, we talked about property taxes earlier, but I think it's important to talk about other taxes that you're going to face in Washington if you're considering this area. Since we don't have state income tax, and of course that's a huge driver of why people want to be here, the state does have to make money, and so they get it primarily in three other tax ways: sales tax, excise tax, and business and occupations tax. So sales tax, yes, we're gonna have a higher than national average sales tax rate. It does vary very specifically down to even the zip code. So you can be in Gig Harbor in a different zip code and you might have a slightly different tax rate. Right now it's averaging about 9%. I want to make sure that I talk a little bit about excise tax because when you sell a home in Washington, this sometimes comes as a surprise to people. Again, a big driver of revenue for the state. Each time a home is sold, if the home is, let's say it's $1 million, okay? Right now in Gig Harbor, the first $500,000 of that sale price are taxed at 1.6%. The next $500,000 up to $1 million are taxed at 1.78%. So you're looking at a blended cost of about 1.7% of your sale price that's going to get paid to the state. I know, it's not great, but let's just remember we don't have state income tax. Lastly, if you own a small business or a large business, but a small business, we all have to pay business and occupations tax, which is about 1.5% of our quarterly revenue. I hope you found some of this information about cost of living in Washington and specifically Gig Harbor helpful. As a local real estate expert, I feel that it's my job to try and educate you about all things Gig Harbor and Washington if you're considering a move here. Not just about houses, because there's so many things to consider. I want to always be your resource. I want you to know you can always give me a call. So today we talked about cost of living. I have lots of other informational videos. Feel free to check them out on YouTube. Comment on anything, reach out on my social media, give me a call anytime. Thanks so much.